Okay, our next interview is with Fred Barron. And Fred, let's get a little bit of your background, family, schools, where you grew up, what your parents did, siblings, etc., wife, children, the whole bit.
Okay, I have all of those.
Okay.
I grew up in Harrison, New York with my parents, my father, Howard, who will come considerably into this narrative later, my mother, Frances. They were both New Yorkers, my mother from Brooklyn, and I have one brother that I grew up with, a half-brother, my father's son from a previous marriage, lives in Chicago, and I knew him but never particularly well. I went to school in Westchester County, New York, college, University of Pennsylvania, got a bachelor's and master's in political science, and then went to Boston University Law School, graduated there. I've been married for 30 years, have 2 children, one just graduated Worcester Polytechnic Institute and is, as of this moment, November 2011, looking for a job. The other is...
He's not alone.
And she's not alone. And my younger daughter is a junior at Smith.
Good school.
And she loves it and hopes to go into education or psychology. She hasn't figured out which, or some... language acquisition is what she enjoys.
Whatever that means.
How people learn languages or learn to, whether it's English as a second language or developmentally how 1, 2, 3, 4-year-olds learn to speak and communicate.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
John Jenkins once said of me that I have command of no language.
Right.
So I'm not the right person to ask about that. I know how you were bitten by the book bug, but why don't you just tell everybody who's going to be watching this video just what happened to you?
Well, my father was a collector for many from the 1950s on, and he particularly liked everything. Yeah. But his collecting ran to maps and atlases, books in general, but it was never literature. It was always historically oriented. But he also had collections of coins, and he and his brother had been in the stamp business, and he collected paper money and essentially everything under the sun. So I grew up around old paper, just for lack of a better term. When I was in my second year in law school and seeing the people around me and the summer jobs they were getting and the summer job that I got interning at the National Labor Relations Board, I came to the determination that I think he had come to years ago, that I was not cut out for a corporate life. He had always, to the extent that he could, work for himself. He had set up several businesses, and a couple had succeeded and ultimately failed, but he had made a good life out of it. But it was always working for himself, and I had that streak in me, too, that I was not cut out to be in middle management and taking orders from, or directions from people whose directions I thought might not coincide with my interests or what I thought should be done. So I went to him and said, at that point, this was 1982, and at that point he was turning 70 years old.
Yeah.
And I said, I'd like to see if I'd come into the book business. He said, because my rationale was I could always go back and practice law if I wanted to.
Sure.
He, getting on in years, if something happened to him and the business were not to be there, I could not just suddenly
move into it.
Move into a book business, not having any background at all in it, except that I enjoyed being around the material. So he said, finish law school, pass the bar, and come back and we can do that. So I went through my third year of law school. I passed the bar exam. I had 102 fever the day I passed the bar exam, but I passed it in New York. I have actually kept up my bar membership ever since. I've not let that lapse. The extent of my serving or doing anything in the legal profession has been writing a few threatening letters for friends with a Frederick Barron Esquire letterhead on it. But it has helped me just in the way I see things and deal with problems. So I never regret having been to law school. It gave me exposure to that to say, no, this is not, not what I want to do necessarily. So I went to March of 1983. I started in the business with my father, and that summer I attended the Rare Book School in Denver, just essentially to get the basics. How to write a description, what are the qualities of a book, things of that sort. And that was very useful, because my father was sort of a lone wolf. He had not had any formal training as a bookseller whatsoever.
Seat of the pants guy.
Absolutely seat of the pants guy as far as buying, selling, everything.
Right.
You knew him very well.
I knew him very well.
And
I liked him a lot.
He made a lot of good decisions. He would buy things on the seat of the pants and make some bad decisions. But he bought what he liked, and he liked most everything in the 18th and 19th centuries, primarily American. But once again, for whatever reason, his background and my background, it was just never literature at all.
Yeah.
So I have never dealt in any way with literature. It's historically related travel, exploration. I have drifted towards 19th century, 18th, 19th century maps and atlases as a niche, which certainly at the time in the 80s when I was doing it, no one was really doing to any extent.
Right.
I have never minded things, and actually in some way prefer things that are a little dirtier and grittier, and that the appearance, I like the thing for what it is, not necessarily the appearance. So sometimes I get criticisms from people. My stuff doesn't always look the nicest and cleanest, but I like to think it's always interesting stuff at the very least.
Functional.
Yeah, and functional. So, going into American atlases, including county atlases, which no one had really done.
Yeah.
As atlases, as opposed to breaking them up and selling the maps to
Right.
people
That's what they used to do.
for their walls. And pocket maps, travel guides, wall maps in particular, I've done a lot with over the years, and really no one had, again, made that, especially because no one liked to deal with the things. They were dusty. They're big, and they take up space, and they're dusty and dirty, and inevitably in less than prime condition, just by the physical nature of it gets rolled up, gets put in the basement or an attic.
Yeah,
it gets
that's it.
dust, a little cracking, and so they're not all that attractive to deal with. But there's information on them, and there's history to them that unfortunately has my phone ringing.
Okay. Well,
Which I am sorry about.
that's okay. We usually say to close your cell phones when you come in, but we haven't been doing it lately.
Well, I'm sorry about that.
Well,
and I'm sorry to whoever may be watching this.
How was the question always is when you're working with your father or working with a parent in a business, how did you find it? Did you find it difficult? Did you find it easy? I knew your dad rather well. He had a way of doing things.
I found working with him incredibly easy.
Oh,
I
great.
I worked with him for 16 years before he passed away in 1999, and he was the best partner I could ask for, because he went in with the attitude, this is your business. Even in the earliest, first couple of years, when I knew essentially nothing, and he went in, this is still your business, your decisions. I will help, I will work with you, whatever, but I'm not going to be around forever. You have to take a direction that you want. The earliest things that I did was to narrow the focus, because my father had no focus whatsoever.
No, well, he liked to buy things he liked
He liked to buy things he liked to buy, which can be a circus collection one day and an aviation collection the next day and an individual book on heraldry, and just he was all over the map.
Right.
And he loved it, and that was him. That he was interested in everything, and he bought everything, and I had to. And it was also the nature of where book business was going at that time. It was heading towards specialization, clearly. The day of the John Sanderson was in here before, and he's actually like that, but the day of the New England generalist go out and buy up collections of all kinds of different stuff was dying.
Yeah.
It just, the material and the world wasn't suited for that anymore. So the world was heading towards more specialization, so I pared off some of the stray branches that he grew on and went more into Americana and the maps and the atlases than he had done. But the other significant thing that happened that gave us a direction was that we handled the residue of Rocky Gardner's
A
business.
very well-known New England book dealer.
Right, I was going to get it. Rocky Gardner was a well-known base level. He was essentially a dealer for dealers. He went out and did the legwork and scared up stuff out of amazing stuff out of who knows where.
No one knows where.
And he was, a compulsive buyer, and he had a barn, which was legendary. And I'm sure you went there, and we went there.
On a regular basis.
Everybody went there, and you just started. It was like a mine, and you went to a shaft, and you started working it. Because this was 50 plus years of just accumulating. So we worked with. We made the deal when Rocky was still alive, but for another month maybe. But mostly we dealt with Avis, his wife, who was the financial side of the operation, and she was a major furniture and paintings dealer. And from what we could tell after we had dealt with this accumulation, was that she was the profitable side, and his books and paper and all the rest was the fun side, but a cost center rather than a profit center. But they would go out, and he would buy a station wagon load of all kinds of stuff, and she would buy one highboy and sell it, and that would be the profit. And they wouldn't make an awful lot of money on his material. But going through what was essentially the residue of his stock, for lack of a better word, we did, and it led us into some different kinds of ephemera, but mostly trade catalogs that I've now.
I was going to ask you about that.
I've now that's because that was a ready-made inventory of trade catalogs. There was good, there was bad, there was damaged, there was beautiful, which was the nature of going through the barn and the house. It was just stuff that hadn't seen the light of day in 20 years, even to him. Though I'm sure if he'd been alive and you'd asked him, he could have given you chapter and verse because his memory was infallible. Because you walk through the barn and the house and you'd pick out stuff and you put it down. He'd give you prices: $19 on that, and $38 on that, and $73 on that. And then you go back in the house and he'd write it up, and he would remember every price down to the penny for each item, and be able to give you the backstory on everything. So that's what led us into trade catalogs, which is my other major specialty now. But doing that, it was stock, estate, whatever you want to call that relationship, brought a tremendous amount of exposure for us to certain people and inventory, and was a significant thing that we did. And that was an awful lot of work to go through for two people. We were lucky we were only about 15 miles from where they were, so we were really the only interested dealer within a reasonable distance, because it wasn't the kind of place you could have just gone in and hauled it back, hauled in the truck and taken it away and worked off-site. There was just too much, and just before we got started, there was a fire in the front part of the barn, which had ruined stacks of Harper's Weeklies and newspapers and all kinds of things, which fortunately did not, aside from some smoke, get into the rest of the barn. But there was a front area of the barn that just was obliterated by smoke. So that was a major event in taking me where I am, what I deal with.
So besides Rocky and besides your dad, who are some of the other people who had a major influence on you as a bookseller?
Those were the most important ones, obviously.
Was there anybody else who helped out after Dad passed away, for example?
Not really. At that point, I
You were pretty
was
much-
pretty well established at that point. I dealt with Dick Arkway a fair amount, bought things from him, but it was as much as anything. It was my father and his relationships and things, but I didn't. And to some degree, I missed not having had an in the trade, established dealer kind of mentor.
Yeah.
But it didn't happen that way.
Well, your father was your
Yeah, my
your
father was, but he wasn't, an establishment, whether it's Jenkins or Howell or
Yeah.
Krause or, and I'm missing dozens of other,
Of course. I know
established people, but so many of the people get their start working in one of the
sort of apprentices.
apprentices or low-level clerks or whatever, and they get familiar with the inventory and they get familiar with how you do the business and the customers and all the rest. And that's the one thing that I missed and never had in my training.
What percentage of your inventory is online?
It's hard to say. It's really hard to say because it's a question of how I define my inventory. Because
Okay.
I've got a lot of material, ephemera and things that is in boxes and has been, I don't really look at it. It's of some worth, but not worth. I don't spend too much time on. Again,
Right.
I'm a sole proprietor, and my time is precious, and to go through pricing things at $3 and $5 just doesn't make an all set. Of the things that I have priced at, let's say $150 or more, $100 or more, probably about 80 to 90% is online in one form or another, either on my website or through AB Books or somewhere.
What percentage of your business comes from online sales? Can you give me a rough figure?
At this point, it's still probably about 25%. Most of my business is still my contacts, and I call people or write people and quote things, and
The direct sale?
it's my bringing things to, or my catalogs, which I still do, and I know a lot of people don't, but I still think that.
What percentage of your business comes out of your catalogs? It's certainly not what it once was.
It's not what it once was. 15% or so now. But again, still, the major part is talking to people and making a deal, with either having something, buying something with another dealer, and either I sell it or he sells it,
Right.
or I buy something, call the librarian or the dealer or the collector or whoever it is that.
Basically what I do too.
And I think that's that's the way we all used to do it, and I
can't change.
and I can't, and I'm not going to change that much at this point, except to try to sometimes sort of hitch a ride with someone else's online
Right.
presence.
How many book fairs do you do in the course of a year, and what part do they play in your business?
When I started with my father, he probably did about 15 or so a year, and now a lot of the book fairs that he did no longer even exist. But I'm doing about 6 or so shows a year.
Do you do most of the ABAA shows?
I always do the New York. I've done the Boston ABA show. This is my 29th straight year. I do New York every year. It's convenient for me, so a lot of the expense gets cut down because I don't have to. I go home every night. It's half an hour for me to go home.
Seriously.
I've missed, I think, including my folks, 1 year in the last 35. I do the Miami Map Fair now, which is now a very good show for me.
Show.
Yeah, that's a very good show for me. And I do the San Francisco Book Fair every other year. I used to do Los Angeles every year. I don't do that anymore.
Doesn't.
It didn't pay, and I started doing Miami Maps, which is right about the same time.
I see.
And for me, doing the logistics of essentially doing separate inventories, some to Miami, some to San Francisco, getting some, and then sitting there on the floor in Miami at the end of the Miami show, separating this goes to San Francisco, this goes back home.
Yeah, it can be a drag.
Is a nightmare. Once every 2 years is quite enough
I can see what
to
you're
go
saying.
through that.
One of the questions that I ask is, if you were entering the book trade today, would you? And if you would, how would you go about doing it?
I haven't even thought about that question.
Obviously.
I have no. Well, the one area in which I've thought about it is with regard to my older daughter, who's currently unemployed, and if she said, I want to do what you did and come in, and I would say, no, I want you to work. That you should get some real life world experience first, and then we'll talk about it, as opposed to the way I did it. Now, I'm younger than my father was at a similar point, and his age played tremendously into my decision. And I think he recognized that as well. He was a very perceptive person.
Absolutely.
And, while we never put it in those terms, obviously he knew that, at age 70, in the early 80s, that this was not something that could last forever. The best advice would be, as it has always been, if you want to be a book dealer, deal in things that you love. Don't deal in something because you think that's where the money is, or for any other reason. It will sort of evolve organically. If you do something you love and start dealing in it, you will succeed in it. If you force the issue and try to deal in something for some other reason, because someone's got a collection that you think you can do something with, but you don't really love the subject matter, you will not succeed. This is, there are people who've made a lot of money in this, there are people who have not made a lot of money in this, but for 90+%, and I'm sure you've been interviewing these people, it's a labor of love in the material that they are dealing with.
Absolutely.
And that's the one, for all the changes in this industry with the internet and communications and email, for whatever, that's the one constant, is that the dealers have to deal in what they love, or else they will not succeed.
What do you see as some of the challenges facing the trade as we move forward the next 5, 10, or 15 years?
The biggest challenge that I see is, and I'm hearing this from people that do antique shows and the book fairs, is that there seems to be a lessening of attachment to to things. That from antique shows, I'm hearing people aren't buying the old antique furniture as much, and they're not buying at the top end, old master, impressionist paintings. That's a different world. But in the nuts and bolts, as people grow up with e-books and with online, they are dealing with physical books less. And I'm concerned that lack of connection to current physical books will translate into, well, why do I need an old book? And I can't predict where that's going to take the trade. I deal a lot with maps, and I think that will suffer. Maps have come on a lot in the last 20 years as a separate field.
They're very visual.
They're people get a different form of attachment to them. They get a visual and artistic attachment. They will get a geographic attachment. They like the place that it is, the style of the map, whatever. That I think is less relevant with books. That I think that, for instance, modern first editions that I have not ever particularly dealt with have been hurt tremendously by the internet, and because some of the particular books, when you go online and see 78 copies listed in various forms, that being able to sell it as a rare book has taken something of a hit. Most of the things that I deal with, and one of the reasons that I don't rely online, is that I do a lot of, whether it's ephemera or small, obscure things, is that I don't have things that people are looking for that title. They may be looking in a general area, but you have to describe it to the nth degree to make sure that everyone picks it up in their Google search. And even then, just yesterday I had a piece that I sold to someone that he bought because it was related to military instruction for children. It was a thing of showing flags and soldiers, which I wouldn't have related to military.
Yeah.
So, he's got to find it, and I've got to sometimes put things under people's faces, to say, this is what I have, and not relying on their search.
Right.
Because it may not find that thing that I have that they would like, and they don't even know it exists. That's the.
You've always operated by appointment.
Yes.
You've never had the open shop experience.
We started working out of my parents' house, and after my father died, I did it with my mother, and she was still in the same house for 6 years. I was lucky enough in the year 2000 actually, to find a house in my area where I was able to set up. I've got about 1,300 square feet of space directly attached to the house, separate entrance. Aside from I would like a little more space, it's really a dream kind of setup for a book dealer who doesn't have an open shop.
So you're happy?
Yeah, as far as my physical plant, yes.
Okay.
I close the doors, and I walk to work, feed the dogs, let them out in the middle of the day. Can't hear what's and the business is physically segregated from the rest of the house. There's no overlap, no spillover of things, and my wife ensures that. No, it stops there.
Yeah, that's where it stops.
Yeah.
And so we have stopped as well. We've come to the end of our session. Thanks very much, Fred.